Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about one of the most critical developments in the ongoing war in Ukraine, the fall or weakening of the so-called land bridge that connects Russia to Crimea through southern Ukraine. Many analysts believe this could be a major turning point in the war, one that could reshape the battlefield, change strategies on both sides, and potentially alter the long-term outcome of the conflict. So in this video, we'll explore what the land bridge is, why it matters so much, what's happening to it right now, and how its possible collapse could change everything. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, one of its main strategic goals was to connect mainland Russia directly to Crimea by land. Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014, is geographically connected to Ukraine, not Russia, making it dependent on fragile supply routes like the Kerch Bridge over the strait. For Russia, maintaining control over a continuous corridor through the southern regions of Ukraine, stretching from Donetsk and Luhansk through Mariupol, Melitopol, and into Crimea, was crucial. This corridor became known as the Land Bridge. By mid-2022, after heavy fighting and the capture of Mariupol, Russian forces had established control over this strip of territory, giving them what they saw as a permanent link between Russia and Crimea. It was a symbol of their occupation and a practical logistic artery for troops, ammunition, and supplies. For Ukraine, the existence of the land bridge was a constant problem. It allowed Russia to move large quantities of military equipment easily between the front lines and the Crimean bases. It made it harder for Ukraine to isolate Crimea or to disrupt Russia's logistics. The corridor also served a psychological and political purpose for Moscow. It was a demonstration of success, a physical manifestation of Russia's territorial ambitions. Losing it would be not only a logistical blow, but also a symbolic one, undercutting the image of control and permanence that the Kremlin wanted to project. That's why any talk of its fall draws so much attention from military experts, politicians, and analysts around the world. To understand how significant this is, it helps to look at how Russia used the land bridge. Through it, Russia moved troops from Rostov-on-Don and other bases into southern Ukraine. Supplies such as fuel, ammunition, and replacement vehicles traveled south through Melitopol and Tokmak to Crimea. The same routes were used for civilian administration to bring in Russian officials, police, and occupation structures. For nearly 2 years, the corridor was a lifeline keeping the occupied territories functional. It also allowed Russia to project power deeper into Ukraine's south and to maintain pressure on cities like Zaporizhzhia and Mykolaiv. Essentially, it turned the entire southern coast into a fortified zone under Moscow's control. But over time, things began to change. The Ukrainian military, increasingly equipped with Western, supplied long-range weapons, drones, and precision-guided missiles, began to target key points along this corridor. Bridges, railways, and depots that formed the spine of the land bridge came under regular attack. Ukrainian partisans inside the occupied areas carried out sabotage operations. The famous Crimean bridge itself, the Kerch Bridge, was attacked multiple times, disrupting Russia's alternative supply line into Crimea. Slowly, the logistics network that Russia relied on started to show cracks. By 2023, satellite images and intelligence reports indicated that Russia was struggling to move heavy equipment efficiently across the land bridge. Many of the railways had been damaged or disrupted by attacks. Roads were being targeted by artillery and drones. Ukraine's counteroffensive in the Zaporizhzhia region put further pressure on key cities like Melitopol and Tokmak, which sit directly on the main route between mainland Russia and Crimea. If Ukraine were to break through this region, it would effectively split the Russian controlled territory in two, cutting Crimea off from the rest of the occupied south. That's why the fighting around these areas has been so fierce. Both sides understand the stakes. The land bridge is not a single road or railway, but a complex web of routes and logistical points that keep the southern front supplied. Its weakness doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process as each connection becomes less reliable. Ukrainian strikes on ammunition depots and fuel storage facilities force Russian convoys to take longer, more dangerous routes. The leader forcing Russia to move supplies at night or under camouflage, and the Russian army can still move supplies, but with greater risk, higher cost, and reduced efficiency. That's why some analysts now say the land bridge has effectively fallen, not because it's completely gone, but because it no longer serves its purpose as a secure and efficient link. If the land bridge collapses completely, the consequences for Russia could be enormous. Crimea, which depends heavily on supplies from the mainland, would face shortages of fuel, food, and military equipment. Its ability to serve as a base for air operations, missile strikes, and naval logistics would diminish. Russian troops stationed in southern Ukraine could find themselves isolated, with fewer reinforcements and limited resupply. This would weaken their combat readiness and morale. For Ukraine, this would open new possibilities, perhaps even making Crimea vulnerable to deeper strikes or future liberation efforts. A cut in the land bridge would also force Russia to rely more heavily on the Crimean bridge over the Kerch Strait, which has already been damaged several times and remains a vulnerable target. But we should be careful about calling the fall of the land bridge an absolute fact. Warfare on this scale is fluid, and control over territory doesn't necessarily translate to logistical stability or instability. Russia still holds a significant amount of land in southern Ukraine. Even if the corridor is disrupted, it can reroute supplies through alternative roads, use ferries across the Sea of Azov, or increase air and naval transport. While these methods are slower and riskier, they might be enough to keep their forces operational, at least for the near term. Moreover, Russia has adapted before, building pontoon bridges, creating backup supply depots, and reinforcing key transit points with heavy defenses. Ukraine's challenge is to maintain pressure and make these adaptations too costly or unsustainable. That's why we've seen continued Ukrainian strikes deep into occupied territory, including attacks on ports in Crimea and depots near Mariupol and Berdyansk. These operations aim to make Russia's logistics as inefficient and dangerous as possible. Over time, such pressure erodes the ability of Russian forces to sustain high-intensity operations. That's why even incremental gains, destroying a bridge here, disrupting a railway there, can add up to a strategic breakthrough. In this sense, the fall of the land bridge might not mean a single dramatic event, but rather a slow suffocation of Russia's logistics network. Another key factor is morale and perception. The land bridge is not only a physical route, but also a symbol of Russia's supposed success. When Russian officials first announced in mid-2022 that the corridor had been secured, it was presented as proof that Russia's campaign was succeeding. They spoke of restoring rail connections, opening new administrative links, and integrating the occupied territories into the Russian Federation. Losing or weakening this corridor undermines that narrative. It shows that control is temporary, that resistance persists, and that Ukraine can still strike deep into what Russia claims as its own territory. In modern warfare, perception and morale matter almost as much as territory, and the psychological impact of losing this link could reverberate through the Russian ranks and political leadership. From a strategic point of view, the weakening of the land bridge changes the entire geometry of the war. If Crimea becomes harder to supply, Russia might have to divert resources from other fronts, like the Donbas, to protect it. This would give Ukraine new opportunities elsewhere. It also raises the question of how sustainable Russia's long-term presence in southern Ukraine really is. The cost of maintaining thousands of troops in isolated territories without secure logistics could become unbearable. For Ukraine and its Western allies, this offers a potential path to eventually reclaiming more territory, not necessarily through a single decisive offensive, but through continuous attrition and pressure that makes the occupation untenable. Still, there are risks. Severing the land bridge completely is extremely difficult. The areas in question are heavily fortified, mined, and defended by layers of Russian artillery and air defenses. Ukraine's counteroffensives in 2023 and 2024, though courageous, encountered immense resistance. Even if Ukraine cuts through parts of the corridor, Russia might still manage to hold on to enough territory to maintain some form of connection. Moreover, as long as the Kerch Bridge stands, Crimea is not entirely isolated. That's why Ukraine continues to target it periodically. It's the most visible symbol of Russia's grip on Crimea and a crucial piece of its supply network. Another aspect often overlooked is the human and economic impact. The land bridge runs through regions that were once home to vibrant Ukrainian communities, Mariupol, Melitopol, and Berdyansk among them. These areas have suffered immense destruction and displacement. As the corridor weakens and fighting intensifies, civilians continue to bear the brunt. Infrastructure destroyed in strikes takes years to rebuild, and entire towns are left without reliable electricity, water, or communication. The fall of the land bridge is therefore not just a military story, but a humanitarian one, highlighting the devastating cost of this war for ordinary people. For Western governments, the potential collapse of the land bridge is seen as a sign that Ukraine's strategy of gradual attrition and deep strikes is working. It reinforces the argument for continued military aid, especially long-range missiles, drones, and artillery capable of reaching far behind enemy lines. A disrupted Russian supply line also reduces the intensity of Russian attacks elsewhere, potentially easing pressure on Ukrainian cities. However, it also raises the stakes. As Russia feels more cornered, it may resort to harsher tactics, increased missile barrages, or attempts to widen the war in other domains, such as cyber attacks or energy disruption. The broader geopolitical implications are also significant. Crimea has been the cornerstone of Russia's influence in the Black Sea. If it becomes vulnerable or isolated, Russia's ability to project power into the region weakens. Its navy, already under pressure after a series of Ukrainian drone and missile strikes, could face even greater constraints. Control of Crimea has been a defining factor in Russia's regional ambitions for centuries, so any threat to it will have deep political repercussions in Moscow. A perceived loss there could shake domestic confidence in the war and in the Kremlin's leadership, even if the regime maintains tight control over the narrative at home. Looking ahead, the future of the land bridge will likely determine much about the trajectory of the war. If Ukraine can continue degrading it through precise and sustained operations, it may force Russia into a more defensive posture. If Russia manages to stabilize it, the war could settle back into a prolonged stalemate. Both outcomes carry risks, but the momentum seems to be shifting slowly toward Ukraine's favor as technology, intelligence, and coordination with Western allies improve. The key for Ukraine will be maintaining pressure, sustaining morale, and continuing to innovate in how it conducts deep strike operations. Ultimately, the story of the land bridge is a story of how logistics shape wars. Control of supply lines, movement corridors, and transport hubs often matters more than the number of troops on the front line. The land bridge gave Russia a strategic advantage early in the war. Its weakening now threatens to reverse that advantage. Whether it fully collapses or not, the psychological and operational impact is already evident. Ukraine has shown that no part of occupied territory is safe from its reach. That reality alone changes the nature of this conflict. So, is the fall of the land bridge truly a turning point in the Ukraine war? It may well be. Even if it's not an immediate collapse, its erosion signals a deeper shift from a phase of Russian consolidation to one of increasing vulnerability. As Ukraine continues to strike with precision and determination, the logistical backbone of Russia's occupation grows weaker. And with every bridge destroyed, every convoy halted, and every depot hit, the illusion of permanence fades a little more. The coming months will show whether this gradual unraveling becomes the decisive moment historians one day call the turning point. Thank you for watching and staying informed. If you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring you more in-depth coverage and analysis of global events. Stay tuned for more updates on Ukraine and other major geopolitical developments. See you next time!